Welcome to my Self-Care Shit, the podcast, where we talk about what true self-care looks and feels like. I'm your host, Kathy Love, two-time TEDx speaker, author, and self-care coach. Each week, we'll have honest conversations on how to create the peace and stability we crave in our lives. Karen Laos is a keynote speaker, executive advisor, and TEDx coach who transforms how high-achieving women communicate in business. Fondly called the confidence cultivator, she's empowered professionals at NASA, Google, Facebook, Netflix, and Sephora. Her mission? To silence self-doubt in 10 million women by giving them communication tools that drive tangible results in the boardroom and beyond.
Sure.
I'm obsessed with what you're doing, and I am, and I'm,
You.
I'm,
Thank you.
I, as the word of the outlier for this year is unleashed. I am ready to be unleashed,
Ooh, I like it. I like it.
which is why what you talk about is so important for everyone to hear. This is why I've been wanting to have this conversation with you because when I first met you in the Outlier Project, you embody the confidence that so many women would love to be able to walk into a room with. And the more I've gotten to know you, that is a genuine confidence. That is not a mask or an act that you put on. It's real. And that comes from inside. And that
Mhm.
is the healing work that I talk about is all the stuff that's happening on the inside. And so
Wow.
I just want everyone who's listening today to hear from you about where that confidence comes from and how you
Mhm.
live your life with it. And I
Wow.
know from looking at, and knowing your story that this kind of started with a moment, right, where you were in a meeting and had a moment where you kind of shut down, right? And so
Yeah, I mean, and I would say that that was kind of the tipping point, but there's the history of the lack of feeling deserving and all of that from my upbringing for sure. So,
so you didn't always, you weren't born with this confidence.
no,
I
no.
think sometimes we
So
we meet people or we see people walk into a room and we just imagine that they were born like that.
I know exactly. And that's exactly what I want people to know is that these are skills that anyone can learn, but we have to be intentional. And first, we have to see that we actually have those blind spots, or we don't realize that our presence is not matching our expertise and our brilliance. And that's the thing that I really see and want to hold as a vision for women that aren't holding it themselves because I can see what's possible that people can't. Just because for all of us, it's like coaches I hire, they see things in me that I don't see. And that's obviously why we bring in these experts to help us. Well, because first of all, it is such a compliment about the embodiment of confidence because that's a huge. I have been doing so many different iterations of what's my one sentence of what I do best. And it's so interesting because I always focus on the communication skills, but that's really the pathway to the freedom of what confidence embodied looks like. Because, in other words, when you know the communication skills to use, you know how to hold your, like, I mean, just getting really tactical, like, you know how to speak with authority and conviction through the mechanics of your voice, you know how to hold your presence from a body language perspective. All of these things are small tweaks that any of us can learn. And where I see a lot of women misrepresenting themselves is in their voices. So I think about somebody recently that I heard on in an audio chat room. This was actually a few years ago in the for anybody that's listening that knows of the group or of the thing Clubhouse.
Right.
So I was very heavily on Clubhouse. I had like 10,000 plus followers on there. That is not a normal thing for me in one place. And so to have this platform where I could really showcase my expertise and help more women, I remember specifically going to one of those rooms, they called them, where a friend of mine who is a doctor, an incredible expert in her field, and I was excited to hear her do her thing. But I will tell you, she started with Hi, hello everybody. And hemming and hawing and a softer voice. And I'm thinking, who is this person? She completely misrepresented. And as soon as a word is spoken, even before a word is spoken, people decide, do I want to listen to this person? But if we look at a chat room where they can't even see your face, so they don't see your presence before you get there, as soon as you open up your mouth and speak, people determine that if I want to listen to this person or not. And it's the same for the more relatable situation is you're calling a customer service rep at Verizon or whatever customer service, the cable company, you can tell right away, oh, I think I'm going to call back and get a different person. Or you've got somebody that you think is amazing, all because of the tone of their voice.
Just by their voice.
Yeah. So it's
So,
astonishing to me.
and you say that that strength in your voice and the ability to speak in a way that people listen has a lot to do with trusting your voice. And when we talk about healing from codependency, a lot of it is trusting yourself, that you have something worth saying, that you deserve to speak up and all of that. So, how do you see trust tying into that, being able to use your voice?
It's such a journey. That's a hard question to just answer like quickly, I will say, because even there are moments where time and time again, it's like, I didn't trust myself. And so I'll share the story just because the short answer is it's an evolution of continued milestones and action steps that you take. And then you build that confidence. And over time, you start embodying it. And then you go, one day you realize, I don't have to think about this anymore. It's
Right.
just in me. So I do think it's important to start with how I grew up because it's like a lot. I think I've learned that a lot of people have similar journeys. So I grew up
Okay.
in a very traditional home. So the first thing is what's unusual about me is that I'm the woman that's going to raise her hand even if I'm 60% qualified for something. And that comes from my dad. My dad taught me how to negotiate at flea markets when I was 6 years old and gave me a few dollars and said, go have fun, but never pay full price. And so I don't know if I was just afraid or wanted to get his approval or what, but it was fascinating to me that you could negotiate. I didn't even know what that was, obviously, at that age, but I loved the result. And he always taught us the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You don't have unless you ask. Now, juxtaposed with a very traditional home where my mom was raising nine of us. I'm the last of nine kids. And she had her voice was very much subdued in the home. Her territory was the kitchen and the homemaking. So my dad, of course, trusted her with that. But what she modeled for me is that your voice doesn't actually matter unless a man, hence the authority figure. And in my case, growing up, those two were the same. That if they tell you that you're okay, that you can speak, all of that, then you can speak. So but it was also confusing because my mom was a powerhouse in the community. She was recognized all over the place in the papers and that kind of thing for her leadership with different organizations. She was a woman of action. She rallied all these people. She started ministries at church. And so it was my now looking back through lots of therapy, the reconciliation of that for me was okay. If I am delivering value to someone, so in other words, when I accomplish things for someone, that in that accomplishment or the production of things, that is where I get my value, not just because of who I am. And it was many years later where it was actually my now husband, when we were dating, when I was telling him all about my day, he said, you know, I love that you love your job, Karen, but I want you to know that I want you to recognize that, that's actually not why I love you. I love you because of who you are, not because of what you do.
And that was why we love Chris.
I know. He's a good guy. So that was one of those moments of, wow. It's so funny how you can know something intellectually, but then experientially, it's completely different.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure if somebody had said you have value, I'd say, of course. But it's such a different feeling when somebody is actually seeing you, is accepting you for exactly who you are in that moment. And that's probably why I feel so passionate about accepting people, regardless of how they show up, their decisions, and all of that. Of course, it's important to have boundaries, but when we show love to people and we create safe spaces for people to show up and be themselves, then almost anything can happen. And this is something I underestimated as a strength because I, again, we all just live with ourselves our whole lives. So we don't really think about things sometimes as strengths. But I remember time and time again, and I still hear this now of, I feel so comfortable with you. Wow, I've never told anybody this before. And I'm guessing you've had similar comments, Kathy, because I think you and I are very similar.
Yes, but I feel the same way. I have had those feelings with you. And as you were talking about the fact that you approach everyone with that love and openness, I've experienced that from you in in the outlier community with other members. And just the way you show up is very open and loving. So
Oh,
I've seen that myself. Yes.
thank you. That means a lot. So I bring up that past because I think it's important that I had this successful career, a big part of it with seeing how my parents showed up in more of the production or the work scenarios. And then I found myself in my 40s in a boardroom about ready to present. And yeah, I was tongue tied, my stomach was in my throat. I just could not get the words out. And it was so embarrassing. And my boss actually, in the nicest way possible, shut down the meeting. And she pulled me aside after in her office and she said, Karen, you didn't trust your gut. You could have just tabled the meeting. And that was the moment when I realized two things. One, what? I could have tabled the meeting? Like that was an option? And then secondly, why do I keep asking for permission? I was so embarrassed. And I was thinking, I'm 40 something years old. I am commanding stages all over the world. And yet, in front of this particular situation, come to realize many years later, my boss was really the archetype of my dad, which is why I had such a hard time in any room with her and always thinking other people knew better than me and thinking, oh, there must be older and smarter and wiser than me. And the irony is a lot of those people I found out later were not older than me. But either way,
Or wiser, I'm
yeah,
sure.
yeah, maybe so. But what I realized through lots of growth work and therapy is that we all have agency, which again, I would have known intellectually, but somehow I was giving my power away to her because I was looking at her as the authority figure like my dad. And the other thing about that is that I actually disagreed with what she suggested I present months prior. That was also the conflict. That was the main conflict because I didn't think this was the right place. So but I didn't speak up in advance. I tried to run with it because I was taught you don't question your boss, you figure it out. But then when it came game time, I couldn't do it. And then the other thing that was the big aha later is that I realized I was actually in a prison of my own making. There was no reason why I needed to be quiet or to not speak up, stay silent. And I definitely started dipping my toe into the water more and more. And then I realized how incredibly amazing it felt when I would speak up. And this goes back to your initial question about trusting yourself. I taught myself something I would recommend anybody who is in the place where I was to start with. Here's a phrase that you can use that's both direct and diplomatic, which is here's my vote. So the story goes that my boss in another time said, you always come to meetings and tell us all the research and give us the information and you ask us what we think. I want to know what you think. And it really hit me because I was always so used to being the chameleon, the one that made everybody feel good, the one that made sure everybody was happy and comfortable. And if we talk about self-care, I mean, it's like, what the heck? That is such a codependent quality. And that was my coping mechanism when I grew up because I just wanted my dad to be pleased with me and to not be disappointed in me. And so in realizing, much later in life, it was, and now I totally forgot what I was saying, but anyway, this whole idea of trusting yourself, the here's my vote is a really, that worked for me because it was direct and diplomatic. Even though for other people, it might work fine to say, here's what I think, and you just say it. But that felt too, I don't know. I was still too afraid of saying it that directly because it goes back to I wanted them to be pleased with me as opposed to being, well, whatever, the opposite, where they might not be pleased. But then it's also funny, isn't it? How we often think, oh, what if they're not pleased with me? There isn't always a direct opposite that they're going to be mad at you. It's so funny how we can look at those things inside our heads
Right.
because here's that. So anyhow, all this to say, here's my vote felt really comfortable. And I've gotten some really good feedback that it's worked for people too.
Well, I love that. And I know I'm sure that there are people listening who will be able to take that and use it from this point on. I think that there are so many people that I talk to who have very similar upbringings and feelings, whether it's their dad or their mom or whoever it is that they are conditioned to defer to. And I was curious if you, how many boys and girls and what the
Oh,
scenario was for the
yeah.
sibling.
So most of my life, there were seven of us. So two of my siblings passed away. They started with the girl, they ended with the girl, and all the rest are boys. So now I'm the last. There's six boys and me. So I didn't know my siblings that passed away. They were older when I was younger. And nonetheless, it is very interesting when you think about how, I mean, it all depends on the scenario, but I was definitely the apple of my parents' eye. I'm like, oh, we got our girl finally. And I think if I think about, a lot of times people will ask me, were you spoiled? And I mean, maybe, but I don't, I didn't have like all these what you would perceive as, again, another thing people have said is, oh my gosh, were your brother super protective? But I think we were all just trying to survive in the household. As far as, you know, there wasn't any physical abuse, but my dad was very just his way or the highway, and I think we were all just afraid of him trying to stay out of his way. So I think the brothers really banded together, and I was 4 years younger than the youngest brother. So it was almost like by the time I was in high school, he was in the last brother home was in his senior year. So yeah, I don't know. I always
Did
wondered
they have a
how did,
voice though when they were in the house? Were they given a voice where
no,
you were deferring to your father or not speaking until it wasn't valid until a man validated it? Did they have a different experience or were as young boys were they not validated as well?
they were not. No, he just was a man of few words, my dad.
Hmm.
So we all kind of, I mean, it's interesting to hear them talk about, because I remember having the experience even as a little girl, like he worked on the cars, he did everything mechanically. And so, it's like, hold this flashlight. That's basically like, hold the flashlight.
Right.
And then my brothers had similar experiences and we all just hated it because he wouldn't say, well, he wouldn't educate. Here's what I'm doing. And I think even one of my brothers asked and he's like, just hold the light. You know, he just didn't have time for that. So I don't think my brothers had a voice either. But I also think that we were all, again, just, yeah, nobody pushed back. You were just taught you don't do that.
And when we look back at our childhoods and, obviously there are things that, our parents did that we don't do as parents, but it's always just to understand, to look back and to understand where we've learned or not learned the things that, have come into our lives and not to blame, not to judge, but just to
Mhm.
understand. I always think
Yeah,
that's important to say.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's fascinating when you look at all, and it's so complex, all the dynamics.
For sure. For sure, especially in a house with that many siblings and dynamics. But I love that you took us through that because everything we do on these calls is about giving examples of how we can learn, that none of these thoughts or beliefs or behaviors that are identified as codependent can't be unlearned or learned for the first time. And so I just think that your example of being able to trust your voice is so powerful for the people out there who are still struggling to do that.
Thank
Um,
you. It's
and
amazing
now,
how much it comes up. Yeah, go ahead.
right, and now look at you. Like your voice is what you use. That is you. You use your voice with confidence and authority
Mhm.
to help other people.
Thank you. Thank you. I will say it's so fascinating when I think about how much my confidence has grown by having a bigger platform in the world. I mean, because I left my job in 2020 to focus on my mission of reaching 10 million women to silence self-doubt and have communication strategies instead. By the way, I just hired the event planner for the Chase Center stage. So that is happening in 2030. And we have our first call on Friday. It's
You have your
happening.
you have your
Eight
first what?
first call with the event planner on Friday, and there are 18,000 seats in the Chase Center. So I plan to
And
fill them all.
well, I will be taking up one seat, and I'm sure there will be lots of outliers filling up the seats too.
Thank you, Kathy.
Karen, I can't wait to see that. I remember in our very first phone call, our first call together, you telling me that, and I know you're making that happen, and I
Mm,
cannot wait to see it.
thank you. That means a lot. It started getting real when I started really talking about it. It's one thing to talk about reaching 10 million women. It's another thing. I can feel people shifting when I say two things after that. We're at almost 5 million now, and it's going to culminate at this event. People are like, "What? An event? Like, what is that going to look like?" I said, "I don't know yet. We'll see."
And so
But
you've
it's
been at that goal, you've been on that mission for 4 years. Is that what you said?
a little over
2022?
five. Like 2020 is when I decided I wanted to reach 10 million in 10 years. So it started as a social initiative called 10 and 10. And one day I'd want that to be a nonprofit for sure, where
Hmm.
it's just continuing to help more women with these tools to speak up. So it's amazing to me what I continue to marvel at is how no matter what age you are, there are still doubts that we have that paralyze us. So when I talk, like a lot of times I talk about silencing self-doubt, eradicating self-doubt, what I mean by that is doubt will no longer paralyze you to the point where it stops you from speaking up.
So you mean you might still have a doubt, or the feeling of a doubt comes up, but you're not letting it stop you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that's really important to acknowledge. I think sometimes, I'm on my soapbox, like we're going to silence self doubt, but it's really about it not holding you back any longer. And sometimes we have to make friends with our doubt. In my book, I talk about naming your critic. So mine is Gertrude, and she's got gray hair that's all up in a bun. I went to Catholic school for eight
Oh,
years.
I'm glad I
So
took my hair down so I didn't look like Gertrude.
no, you'd never look like Gertrude. She had the nun hat on, or I forget what that's called, but and then like wiry cat framed glasses, and she holds a clipboard, and she's always telling me what I'm doing wrong. And that is the visual I have when I think about her. And so sometimes just naming these things can be so helpful. Like, oh, relax, Gertrude. We're gonna be okay. And that truly can make all the difference.
I love that. Well, and it reminds me too of when we talk about, I think people, you know, need to give themselves more grace when they're going through this process. And so,
Yes.
yes, you want to eradicate self-doubt, but there is still going to be some doubt. You just don't let it take over. Like when you're
Right.
meditating, people give up meditating because they think I can't clear my brain of all the thoughts. Well, you don't have to do that. You just don't attach to the thoughts as they come and let that stop you from meditating.
Mhm.
And I think it's just another example of giving yourself grace through the process
Yes.
and not
Yes.
having to do it perfectly, maybe ever, but
Hmm.
definitely as you're learning and practicing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So your voice, you talk about your voice is your power. Your voice really has become your power, your superpower. And it's such a great example of what is possible, no
Mm,
matter what.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. And I think about how, well, I have two stories, but one many years ago, I was interviewing to be a radio show host.
Oh,
And this was a long time ago. I was so excited about this interview. And the guy goes through all the stuff and then he says, okay, so the big thing that I need to tell you is 50% of your listeners are going to love you and they're going to say the most amazing things about you. And you're going to just be on this high. And then 50% are going to hate you. And they're going to say the most harsh, awful, terrible things about you and to you. I need to know if you can come back, go home, and come back the next day and do that all over again. And I was, Kathy, I was not prepared for that. There was no way at that age. I mean, I think I was late 20s, early 30s, and I was so in the beginning of my journey around being okay with people not liking me. But I truly believe that that was God planting a seed for what's to come because I know my platform is meant to be a lot larger. So that continues to be in the back of my mind. And I was reading a couple of years ago the book The Courage to Be Disliked, which I highly recommend as a book.
yeah.
Yeah, and just these things that we've just got to be, and this is where the self-trust comes in. We've got to get to this point through these baby steps, these micro actions of actions that we take that affirm ourselves so that we feel so grounded in who we are, what we stand for, and our reality that we're not shaken by things people say and we're dysregulated, totally thrown off. And yet that is hard sometimes. It's we all live in this world that's real. So it's these feelings can get, what do you call it, stirred up from things we didn't even know were in our childhood and in our operating system or in our belief system. And then we really need to come armed with the techniques and the strategies or whatever you want to call them to have that internal confidence so that nothing does shake us. So
Mm-hmm.
that happened. And then there was another time, actually, it was that same radio station that invited me to come to do a call where I would coach people live. And I got so much feedback later that I was better than the show, the host. Nothing
I
happened
love
from
it.
it at the time. But I remember thinking, because I was, again, such in the beginning part of my journey of why didn't they hire me? I wish they had, but I wouldn't have, they would have eaten me alive. Yeah.
So the fastest way to get people to, you were just talking about not wanting that 50% who was going to hate you. The fastest way that we think about or we perceive to get people to hate us is to say no, right?
Yes.
We don't want to say
Here's the
no to
boundaries,
anybody,
woman.
right?
I
We don't want
know.
to say no. We don't want to disappoint. We don't want them to think we're selfish. We don't want them to think we're lazy or that we don't care about them. So why do you think it's so important to say no?
We have to have self-preservation so that we can serve in our greatest and highest good to society. If we are saying yes to everybody and everything, we are not going to be serving at the highest good. And you know this as well as anybody else here that just like in the airplane, put on your oxygen mask first. So if you're constantly saying no, you're going to be fragmented all over the place. And not to mention resentful, probably. And then resentment leads to unforgiveness. And all of that just gets so stuck in our bodies that we can't fully express the truest version of ourselves. And if we're walking around in these frequencies of shame and guilt and anger and all those negative emotions, then we're not going to be able to really love at our full capacity. We're not going to feel joy or gratitude. So there's a lot of reasons why, but it is hard. I'm not saying it's easy. I mean, I literally this week, Kathy, this I was butted up against this in two scenarios, and I just don't want it's like I'm avoiding it. I'm not really, but I
Right.
I need to go back and say no. And then there's also that balance of when is it a kind and courteous thing to give a reason versus when do you just not have to give a reason? Because just to say no thanks sometimes feels very I don't know, um not enough, I guess. On the other hand, I might need to challenge myself there myself or on my own and say, why can't that be enough? But I will say it's very strange. We stand out when we say no thanks and no context.
And that takes strength and power. That's the power of your voice that you talk about. It takes real power to be able to stand up for ourselves and to trust ourselves that what we're asking for or not accepting, that it's right for us and that's the right thing to do for us. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite, I was thinking of phrases as you were talking about that. One of my favorites is simply I'll pass or I'm going to pass. And this might be funny, but I practiced this at TJ Maxx because I used to feel bad when they would bring out, well, anywhere, frankly, but I shop at TJ Maxx a lot, bring out a piece of jewelry. And then I would feel bad that I didn't buy it because they bothered to bring it out. I'm just like, that's their job. So saying I'll pass, or sometimes if I really have a connection with the person, I might say, oh, I need to love it to buy it. And then, I'll pass. The other one that I really love is I'm not available for that. And that can be it's very clear. And
Yes.
somebody could ask you, well, why not? And then you can decide if you want to say why not or not.
Yeah. And that can cover a broad variety of asks. I like that one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So I think we only have 4 more hours to talk, um, so that we can cover everything. Um, but I think we're going to have to save some of it for a second conversation. This was as magical as I knew it would be. I
Oh,
was really looking forward to this, and I'm so glad we were able to do it. I thank you for saying yes, and for sharing your wisdom with everyone here tonight. And I would love to continue this. I'm going to share all of your social media, your links, your website. Is there anything else that you want to share with everyone before we go?
two things. One, I would say to speak first in any meeting or scenario, because this is one of my best tips because it's also so simple. Those moments when you're in a meeting or you're at a gathering, maybe it's a networking event and you go around the circle, somebody kind of says, okay, who wants to go first? And most people don't go first. Most people wait for someone else. And there's some great research around the people that talk, especially the ones that talk first, show up and are perceived as leaders. So there's a lot of reasons to speak first. Also, you're not going to be wondering for the next half hour, oh my gosh, I need to say something because I need to have my voice heard in this meeting, but everybody has said everything and I don't know what to say now. And you will also prevent some anxiety because if you get it out of the way first, you can relax.
I love that
So
idea.
that's a tip. And then that leads me to a freebie that I have on my website for anybody that wants to go to my website, karenlaos.com. You can grab 3 strategies to speak up in meetings. And Kathy, remind me when this is airing. Before
Uh,
April?
Before April, for sure.
Okay. So I am also hosting a retreat that I just launched today for executive women in Santa Fe on April 30th to May 3rd. So that's another thing. If anybody is interested, we have about, I think, 12 or 13 spots at this point. So that's that. And then just remember to trust yourself.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was so
Yay.
great, Karen.
Oh, good.
I just want to hug you. Great job making time for yourself today. Be sure to subscribe to my Self Care Shit, the podcast, wherever you listen in. Your 5-star review will help get this show to whoever needs to hear it. Go grab your free daily self-care checklist on my selfcareshit.com. Please take the last minute of this podcast for yourself to listen to the ocean waves and breathe.